Hello, everybody, and welcome to the virtual operating systems talk. So, this is a post recording of the presentation I gave yesterday for those that were not able to make it. So, this is the operating systems talk by me, Austin Covington. So, here's the table of contents. We've got what is an operating system. We've got Unix in 3 different casings and other terminologies that will be a little bit important. Then we've got a Windows and Mac, and then a Linux and BSD, and then a distributions, and then a choice, misconceptions. You may have heard about operating systems, and then resources for you to check out later, and the conclusion. So what is an operating system? Simply put, an operating system is the software that acts as a liaison between the user, you, and the computer hardware. You would wish it was that simple, but the problem comes down to the fact that there is a lot of programs that need to be written and packaged together to have a robust operating system. So you would think of an OS more as a collection of a whole bunch of programs and processes that need to come together and work in tandem to make things work. We got this line right here that says there even needs to be programs that manage other programs. So if you thought about Task Manager in Windows or the equivalent in Mac OS, if you've ever ran Linux, then that's the same as top or htop or anything like that. Furthermore, since the OS is designed to speak to the hardware, then it's important that that OS is written for that hardware. So most personal computers, say going back 5 years ago, probably all ran the x86 or 64 CPUs, which is a hardware family. So there's the x86 assembly language. We'll talk more about assembly next week, but assembly is a family of languages, so which one you're using is extremely important because running something like x86 doesn't work if you're using an ARM processor. Now, the reason I talked about 5 years ago is because I believe that was around the time that Apple started switching their laptops to the M series laptops, which those have ARM processors in them, and ARM is another instruction set architecture, or ISA, and the reason that's important is because that's another assembly language, and x86 and ARM don't talk to each other. So when you're writing an OS, you have to know what type of CPU you're running, and if you're writing a OS in another language, you have to make sure your compiler understands that CPU. So kind of a lot goes into just the idea of an operating system. For those that are in computer science and maybe even software engineering, or that hybrid electrical engineering one, I think it's called computer system engineering, you're going to have to take operating system classes at some point. At ASU, it's the CSE 330. So at some point, you will understand probably every single term on this page, but ASU has this long description, similar to other colleges, that the operating systems class is about operating system structures and services, processor scheduling, concurrent processes, synchronization techniques, memory management, virtual memory, input and output, storage management, and file systems. So I guess giving you a brief preview, file systems, if you're on a Windows computer, you probably have heard of NTFS. So when you add, say, a new hard drive or SSD or an NVMe, anytime you add storage to your computer, you have to format that, and somebody wrote that file system. NTFS is the one that's popular on Windows. Apple has their own proprietary one that's just called the Apple file system. If you're on Linux, which I could actually show you this time, because I am on Linux, is that if we run, let's see, I think it's lsblk-f. Let's see, that did not come up. It is then fdisk-l. Oops, gotta run it as root. Let me type in my password real quick. You can see, let's see. So we got the GPT, which that's like a overview of the different file systems, but I'm trying to see if I could find, let's see if just LSBOK. Nope, it's not showing up on here. So these are partition types, which are important, but it's skipping over the one thing I actually want to show you, which these on my computer are the 2-in-1 or the extension 4 file system type, and then actually, you know what, I could do this. And we'll just do the ON1. So if I print this, yeah, nope, it's just showing that. Well, so yeah, the this one that says Linux file type, this is the extension 4. Anybody who's used a thumb drive before might have heard of the FAT file system or FAT32. That's actually what this EFI is, which certain motherboards need to boot the operating system off of. And then the swap one is just a special one. It doesn't really have a file system type. It's turns your hard drive into more RAM, but not super important. But yeah, so extension 4 is the one that most Linux people use. Some people may have heard of Btrfs, but all of that is just the file system part, and that's not even talking about everything else on this page. So really we take for granted what goes on under the hood when we're talking about operating systems. There's so much going on, right? Somebody had to write a program that does the what's called virtual memory. So you don't necessarily interact when you write a program. You don't say, hey, go to this specific part of RAM or this specific part of the hard drive, right? There's something on your computer that allocates that memory for you somewhere in the RAM or somewhere on your hard drive, which is interesting. And that's all part of operating systems. Every single operating system needs something like that to work. This one is just for books, which I'll skip over now because there is the resources at the end. And if you're interested more in this theory or like building those specific parts of operating systems, you could find these two books, which is Operating Systems, 3 Easy Pieces, and Operating System Concepts. You could find those at the end of this slide when I upload the slides to the Discord. An operating system provides tools and interfaces to help you interact with the hardware. These normally come in the form of an API, so if you've ever heard that word, that stands for Application Programming Interface. They're ubiquitous for all programming languages, for a whole number of things. Like if you want to talk to Twitter, X, you have to do the X API. If you want to talk to any of the Meta social media stuff, you need the API for that. There's API for your banks. There's a whole bunch of APIs, but operating systems have an API so that when you program in a language, they should have a way to talk to the hardware. And normally this will be done in C, but there are Rust ones, there are bindings for other languages. All of these APIs greatly differ between the the big operating systems that we all know. So Windows has this API, which you could go there and check it out. It's a very long document with like hundreds of different API calls that you could do. Mac OS has their API for the developers. This is not necessarily the API for Linux, but this is like almost anything you could possibly do on Linux is in this book. I believe it's called the Linux application, or the Linux programming interface is what this book is called. And then BSD, I couldn't find one that generically goes to every single distribution of BSD, but there are books later at the end that have API calls, and they're really good learning resources when these three above don't make sense. So now we're getting into folder 2. There are actually only 3 people in this photo because this guy and this guy are the same person. So from left to right, we have Dennis Ritchie, Brian Kernighan, and Ken Thompson. These are kind of 3 very historical figures that are important. These 2 are still alive, Brian Kernighan and Ken Thompson. Dennis Ritchie sadly passed away, I believe in 2008. But these 3 individuals, along with 2 more on this next page, Douglas McElroy and Joe Osana, they were the developers of the original Unix operating system, which, if you want to be specific, it's the AT&T Bell Labs Unix. So these 5 individuals were the lead developers. Dennis Ritchie and I believe Ken Thompson are also responsible for inventing the C programming language, which we'll mention down here. And Brian Kernighan and Dennis Ritchie are important because they wrote the C programming language book. So I'll actually show that because it is a very historical. And it's, if you ever see K and R with the ampersand, that is this book. Sometimes they just omit the C programming language and just say K and R. This is one of the most important computer science books because it really launched the way for programmers to build a whole plethora of stuff. So kind of cool. What the original Unix was, it was kind of the first operating system to be portable or ported. When operating systems were written in the past, they had to be written basically for a specific computer or that specific CPU, like we were talking about before. And technically that doesn't change no matter what. But what C let people do is that when you wrote C, as long as your compiler could compile down to that CPU, then you could run it anywhere. And a lot of people were porting the C compiler to different CPUs. So once Unix was made, it only took a little bit of finagling to get this Unix working on other computers that weren't the PDP-11, which was the computer that the original Unix was written on. And that's extremely powerful. So if you're at the talk, you know I mentioned something like, imagine if all cars had to have a very specific tire for each individual car model. That would be terrible, right? But since we've standardized the like star pattern for the bolts, obviously there's like some restrictions. You can't have like any size of tire on any car, but being able to like switch tires from different cars, or like having that ability to just kind of throw something on is really nice. And that's kind of like what these individuals ended up doing when they wrote Unix in mainly the C programming language. The little bit of finagling they did have to do is just write that little bit of assembly that couldn't be written in the C programming language for whatever reasons, probably speed at the time or size. That's all other individuals had to do to get it working on their different CPUs. So that's like one of the biggest reason why Unix is extremely popular, because all OSs at the time before it were not portable. You couldn't run it on computer A and then port it over to computer B without basically doing a complete rewrite from the ground up. Additionally, one thing that is really nice about Unix is that it's the came up with this thing called the Unix philosophy. So all of these individuals did. And the Unix philosophy basically states that when you write a piece of software, it should only do one thing and do it well. Which, as a philosophy, it's a little bit abstract, but you wouldn't want to write an entire operating system in like one file, or even just a few different files like header files and stuff like that, if you're familiar with those. In C, what you want to do is write, say, the file system in its own say folder, in case you do need like a couple different files, and package that all up into one thing so that it only does file system stuff. Memory management, you only want that one thing to be its own piece of software, and you don't want it to really do anything else. Versus you wouldn't want to combine those two, even though you need both functionalities. You want them to be separate pieces of software so that it does that one thing well, and it doesn't accidentally mess up other stuff when you're trying to combine too much into one area. So the Unix philosophy is still practiced today. If you do a deep dive into Linux, you'll hear the Unix philosophy all the time. So here are some of the terminology. So Unix is what we just talked about on the first page when it's spelt like this, like a proper noun, I guess, capital U, lowercase, everything else. Unix, all capital, is just a trademark, and it's kind of a stamp of approval. So if you've ever heard that Mac OS is a Unix operating system, it's because they pay, Apple pays the Open Group to approve them as a Unix operating system, and they do have to meet the single Unix specification, which is abbreviated to sus. But that's all what capital Unix is. It's a brand name and a trademark, basically. So this is an operating system, this is a branding. So Unix-like, and one thing I forgot to mention during the actual presentation is sometimes you'll see something that looks like this. Let me type it in here. If you see star nix, this also means the same thing as Unix-like, and it also includes Unix. Unix-like are started as systems created by groups that wanted to implement free as in freedom, which is why I wrote Libre. If you ever see Libre in computer science, that just means free as in freedom. You could think about it as liberation. People wanted to write free alternatives to Unix that had the same functionality as Unix, so that's Unix-like. So Linux is not Unix. It's its own thing. It doesn't use any Unix source code, so Linux is something that you would call a Unix-like operating system. Now, the reason they did this is because Unix, this Unix right here, needed to be licensed out, and it cost a lot of money. Somebody during the presentation asked, like, what is the like terms of agreements on that, and how long does it last? I actually don't know, but if you look up the spawn of FreeBSD, which we'll talk about in a little bit, just the OS, not the legality and history of it. There was a huge lawsuit that went on for quite a number of years where I believe AT&T was suing Berkeley, the college, the university, for distributing out stuff, and that caused a huge issue, which is a big reason why Unix-like operating systems were created, because people just did not want to pay the outrageous fees to license Unix from AT&T. So other words we want to talk about, POSIX, so that's the Portable Operating System Interface. This is a family of standards that make porting and compatibility standardized. So when you start talking about terminals specifically, or if you've ever heard of shell scripting or bash scripting, people normally bring up the acronym POSIX a lot. It's a little tricky to understand exactly what POSIX is because almost everything is non-POSIX because it has additional functionality. So POSIX, you almost have to adhere to the standardization of there's multiple documents for POSIX and they're kind of very specific. But most people try to adhere to POSIX as much as possible so that portability, like I could run a shell script on my computer and then send it to you and you can run it on your computer and we should expect basically the same exact thing. That's what POSIX introduced. So most free and open source and even Mac OS try to adhere to POSIX. GNU is our next term, so it's a recursive acronym that stands for GNU is not Unix. This was started by Richard Stallman, who worked for MIT, and he is kind of the first person to really push this Unix-like attempt, where him and his foundation was trying to write the GNU herd operating system, which is basically a rewrite of Unix but free and open source. So any person could go download that source code and compile it so they could have an free and open source operating system. GNU is going to be extremely important moving forward, not necessarily for GNU herd. I'm only going to mention it one other time. But for the tooling and other stuff they made that makes an operating system possible. BSD stands for the Berkeley Software Distribution or the Berkeley Standard Distribution. There's not really a preference, but both are used. BSD is a research operating system. This was the California Berkeley University attempt at Unix. So they licensed, the university licensed Unix from AT&T, and they were doing research and expanding upon it. And this will be important moving forward because it's going to spawn a whole branch of operating systems called the BSDs. But that's when the lawsuit was happening with AT&T, so kind of interesting. These two are really interconnected in the history of computer science. FOSS, so that's just an acronym for free and open source software. That's what Richard Stallman and the GNU people were doing. That's what the BSDs eventually do. There's kind of two different camps in the FOSS world. There's the GNU people and the BSD people. And the reason that's important is because GNU has something called the GPL, which is the GNU license, and BSD has their own license as well. But the difference between the two licenses is that if you use anything that's the GPL, then every single thing that GPL touches in your software has to also be open source. So that's called a copy left instead of a copyright. So everything has to be open source when you use the GPL. The BSD, on the other hand, is whatever that specific license is touching is the only thing that has to be open source. So like that specific file, but everything else in, say, the folder of your software could be closed source. So GPL, everything in your software has to be 100% open source and available to look at. BSD, only that one file has to be open sourced. And technically, it doesn't have to even be open sourced by you. Just whoever the original creator of that file has to keep it open source. But anything that uses that file could be closed source. So there are two different freedom ideas of that, and it's kind of interesting. But if you ever hear FOSS, just free and open source software. libc, so these are libraries of your operating system specifically. The reason I say that is because for people who've heard of Python libraries like PyTorch and scikit-learn, those are just to do like data science and machine learning and stuff like that. But when those update, it's it's a little bit of a hassle on your end, your company's end. But when a libc updates, almost every single thing on your computer changes. So these do change quite often, but they try to be backwards compatible so that things don't break. But if you are somebody who did, say, Linux from scratch, you would have to recompile your entire operating system. Every single piece of software would have to be recompiled to meet this new libc. And so these are kind of important because there's a whole slew of different libcs you could have if you use, say, Linux. But libcs are kind of important. And the reason they're called libcs is because they're for the C programming language, and like we said before, the C programming language is probably what any operating system is written in that you're currently using. Distro is short for distribution, and it has to do with Linux and BSD systems, which we'll talk about that when we get to that chapter. Some Unix derivatives. These are just kind of historically interesting, but there's Xenix, which Microsoft licensed Unix from AT&T, developed it for a while, and then sold it to another company. During that time, they were splitting off from that Xenix operating system, still updating it a little bit, but they were working on MS-DOS, which eventually led to Windows. Sun OS, and then later it became Solaris. So Sun Microsystems licensed Unix from AT&T for multiple architectures. This is mainly popular on servers, which is kind of why it's significantly important still to this day. It is now owned by Oracle because Oracle absorbed Sun Microsystems. And Oracle is obviously an extremely big name. They're the owners of Java as well. And VirtualBox, if you want to do the VirtualBox for the Linux operating system later, I'll have another video on that. Darwin is the Apple licensed Unix from AT&T, and this is kind of the seeds of what Mac OS would be later. So if it wasn't clear before, hopefully it's clear that Unix really had this huge impact on the entire computer world. Basically anything you do with a computer was inspired by these 5 individuals, 3 of them here. It's pretty crazy to even think about that 5 people could change the world so much, but every single thing you basically do that's in electronics that runs programs is influenced by this for all intents and purposes. Other Unix derivatives, kind of a little less known. The BSDs, so I did just talk about BSDs and I'll talk about them more later, but BSD was licensed from University of California, Berkeley, from AT&T, and they made their own stuff. And this no longer exists on its own, but it lives on in derivatives, just like Unix itself. The HP Unix, so I have these stars on these 3 because these are the only, these 2 along with Mac OS still have the Unix stamp of approval, and these 3, Mac OS and these 2, are also still being updated today, which is kind of cool. HP licensed Unix from AT&T, and they were the first to implement LVMs, or logical volume managers. And this kind of just allows you to take multiple hard drives and kind of use them as one hard drive. So it's software that kind of threads together multiple storage devices. So if you've ever heard of like RAID, when you're doing redundancy for your hard drives, or if you've ever heard of striping your hard drive, that's basically possible because HP licensed Unix and developed that. Likewise, IBM had AIX. This is the first OS to support journaling. Support a journaling file system. So when you're typing, say, an essay in Word or something like that, and you don't save, and your hard drive or your computer crashes for whatever reason, if journaling is in your file system, what that is that it kind of like saves it in the background, but in a different file that's not the original file. So this is kind of like, do you want to restore your last session? That's kind of what a journaling file system is, and that's only possible because IBM licensed Unix and was able to develop that, which is kind of cool. So on to the next chapter. So we've got Windows and Mac. I didn't really want to talk too much about either of these because I feel like most people are familiar enough with what they are. If you haven't used one or the other, I highly recommend trying them out at like a friend's house, or if you could go to a store and just play around with them. They are obviously two very different philosophies, but for all intents and purposes, they kind of do the same thing, minus like some have a little bit of specialty. So I have all these pictures on here, and during the presentation, I asked if people could name them. So one common misconception is that people think this paperclip's name is Clippy. It's not. The actual name is Clippit, and then people just started calling it Clippy, so kind of interesting. Nobody knew who this was. Apparently this is Dog Cow because it looks like a dog and a cow. And this is the Apple mascot, so kind of the equivalent to Clippy, except I don't think Dog Cow came up to help you write an essay. So this is the Halo 3 Cortana, as most people may know if they played any games, but the blue circle that pops up on your Windows computer is Cortana for Windows. So two different things technically. Obviously this influenced the name of this though. And then down here, this is a video called Why Mac Sucks. It's actually not derogatory to the entirety of the Mac history. It's actually more of an homage to old school Macs and kind of what Apple's done to change that over the years, and what they stand for now versus what they stood for before. But I included this specific screenshot because this is Mac and like the different customizabilities you could do back like in early 2000s or late 90s. So kind of cool that Mac lets you do this all. But both of Windows and Mac are closed source operating systems. So when you sign that terms of service, the agreement on either of these systems, you're saying that you're not going to modify their source code, and you're not going to view it, you're not going to redistribute it. These are polarizing views to the ones we'll talk about next, but these two obviously won kind of the operating system wars, if you want to call it, in the late 90s. So these are the two dominant OSs now. Almost everybody on a personal level runs one of these two operating systems. Really, if we go down to it, the reason people like either is because they're the default choice and you are kind of forced to learn them. Windows, the one thing that people like about Windows is that gaming is made easy on Windows. It kind of just works right out of the box. Likewise with Mac, people normally like Mac for the, I'll call it the visual development stuff. That's not technically true, but the reason I like to say that is because, at least in my personal life, when I was going to high school, I took web development classes and stuff like that, and we used Macs because Mac's really good at Photoshop and any of the Adobe suite and any of that creative process. So like on Mac, you get the GarageBand. So it's kind of good for like the creatives that need technology. And both of these two, although they're not niches, because saying a niche is kind of funny when it's like millions upon millions of people that need either of these, but they kind of hit the ground running with like a specific way of thinking that was nice for people, and they were just the default options. They worked with Windows worked with hardware companies to get Windows as the default, and then Mac is obviously in-house with their computers. But that's kind of just important to know. Other than that, because we all know what these both of these are, they're kind of just not special or interesting at this level because they're kind of mundane at this point. But that's all I really wanted to talk about there. If you have questions or if you want to talk about it more, throw a question in the Discord and maybe we could have a big conversation about the difference between these two and the differences on this next page. So I know this text might be a little hard to read, but I'll just read the first few lines. So this is the Linux and BSD chapters. Now, in the live presentation, I had the flyer out. The flyer said, I asked on the flyer which of these is not operating systems, which there was 4. There was Mac, Windows, Linux, and BSD. And one person was able to correctly state that Linux is not an operating system, which is what this big meme is here. So this is Richard Stallman. So if we go back here, Richard Stallman is the founder of the GNU Foundation. But there was an interview with him a few years ago. It was actually probably a while ago, but there's a part where the interviewing keeps saying the Linux operating system, so on and so forth. And then he kind of, Richard Stallman interrupts and says, I'd just like to interject for a moment. What you're referring to as Linux is in fact GNU/Linux, or as I've recently taken to calling it, GNU plus Linux. Linux is not an operating system unto itself, but rather another free component of a fully functioning GNU system made useful by GNU core libs, shell utilities, and vital system components comprising a full OS as defined by POSIX. So what he's referring to is Linux is only a kernel. So you've probably heard the Linux kernel before. And what a kernel is the kernel is the part that directly communicates to the hardware, and it acts as the liaison between the programs on your computer and the hardware that your computer is comprised of. So the reason this is not an OS is because an OS is the liaison between you and the hardware. The kernel is the liaison between the programs and the hardware. So if you thought about it as layers, you are kind of the most abstract part of a computer because you're the one that has like the ideas and stuff and using it. Then the next layer down would be like regular applications like your web browser and stuff like that. Below that would be something like your terminal. And then below that would be the kernel, finally. And then below that is just the raw hardware. So, and there would be lines going up and down because there's different communication processes depending where you are in that hierarchy. So, yes, Linux is not an operating system. Now, the problem with this meme here is that not all Linuxes run the GNU core libs, shell utilities, and other components. Now, there's like a 8% chance that it does. Like this computer right here, I am running the GNU software, and it's Linux, so it would be appropriate to call this computer the GNU/Linux operating system. But we'll talk about some Linux distros on the next page that don't adhere to that. So you could read the rest of this if you would like, but I'll just talk about what's on this page. So we have the Tux is this penguin's name. I guess the reason why penguins are the mascot of Linux is because Linus Torvalds, who's the creator of Linux, he was at the zoo, got bit by a penguin on the finger, and thought that was kind of funny that the penguin did that. And his wife actually suggested that penguin should be that. And then I don't remember how the name Tux came to be, but obviously we say penguins wear tuxedos, but kind of interesting. This is the BSD daemon, and its name is Beastie. Technically, this is not for all BSDs, but it's kind of the mascot. So free BSD actually just has the head of this with like no facial features, so it has like the horns and the circle head. But other BSD distros have their own logo, which we'll look at on the next page. And then GNU, for those that know, that's an animal. That's kind of like a buffalo sort of thing. And here we have the GNU mascot and the Tux together. I don't know who drew this, and I don't think it's official, but I kind of thought it was funny. But it is the pairing between these two that makes most Linux operating systems possible. So technically, Richard Stallman is correct. Linus Torvalds in the 90s was creating the kernel, and then I believe he started just using the GNU utils, and then other people started using them for their Linux distros. So it is technically correct in most cases to say it should be GNU/Linux, because they're two different foundations, they're two different communities, but they came together to make an awesome operating system. But it's not true to say every single Linux should be called GNU/Linux, which we'll get to on this next page. But both Linux and BSD are open source operating systems, so they're philosophically are very different than Windows and Mac, because Windows and Mac just comes with defaults, and for all intents and purposes, the average person is stuck with them because the average person isn't going to go out of their way to change them. And when the defaults are already in the way, you probably don't want any of that friction to change them. Whereas Linux and BSD, depending on what distros you choose, from the beginning you have choice. So they're just very different in terms of philosophies, and we'll talk more about choice on the next page. But that's the big takeaway between this page and this page, is that their philosophies from the very beginning are completely divergent from one another. So we're on to the distribution page. I asked people if they could name these. A good portion of these were named, so there was only 4 that could not be named during the excuse me, 5. Yep, excuse me, 6. So the 6 that could not be named were this one. This is Nomad BSD. I don't know what this one's useful for. I was actually trying to research this logo, and this one popped up. And so I didn't read anything about it, but I did download this picture because I thought it was interesting, and maybe I'll research it later. So this is Nomad BSD. This is Void Linux. This is Open BSD. This is Ghost BSD. This is Dragonfly BSD. And this is Devuan. I believe that's how you pronounce the name. It's DEVUAN. But those are the ones that could not be named. People were able to name... Artix was also not able to be named, although people knew that it was a derivative. But so I'll just go through the rest. So this is Artix. This is Pop OS. Before I move on, this, and this are the only BSDs on the page. Everything else is a Linux distribution. This is Ubuntu. This is Nix OS. This is Gentoo. This is Fedora, Arch Linux, Debian, Puppy Linux, and Alpine Linux. So, what are special about these? Now, not every single one here is super special, so let's talk about the root. So, Linux is just kind of a starting point, and then communities have to build stuff around it to make it usable. So, kind of at the root of the tree is the Linux operating system, and then the first big branches come from Debian, which is I think Debian's the second oldest Linux distribution, along with SUSE, which is slightly older. And then Arch Linux is its own branch. Void Linux is its own branch. Fedora is its own branch, and Gentoo is also its own branch. I don't know about Puppy Linux. Alpine is also its own branch. So, why is that important? Well, these branches spawned other branches. So, Debian spawned Ubuntu, which then spawned Pop OS. So, multiple layers of branches. So, people took Ubuntu and built tools upon Ubuntu to make Pop OS. Also spawned from Debian is Dev1. So we'll get into Dev1 and Artix because they're kind of analogs of each other, but Artix is a derivative of Arch Linux. And remember, Arch is its own branch. Void is its own branch, but as far as I know, there's no derivatives of Void. Fedora is its own Linux, and then technically Fedora is under the Red Hat Corporation, and Red Hat also had CentOS, and I think Rocky Linux is a derivative of CentOS, but I could be wrong. But those three all kind of have something to do with each other. And then there's no more derivatives on this page. So what makes these special? Well, Debian's kind of just special because it's older than everything else on this page, and it kind of set the foundation for what everything else on this page could kind of be. Ubuntu kind of just threw some skins onto Debian and added some base software upon that. Now, Ubuntu nowadays is kind of treading ground because they're using something called Flatpaks and Snaps. I think they're actually using Snaps specifically, but with all of these, the way you download software is through something called a package manager, and a few years ago, something called Snaps, Flatpaks, and then there's one other that I can't remember what it's called. But those three things are kind of new package managers that run on any system, and Ubuntu's trying to standardize those. So that's kind of what makes Ubuntu special. So it's a derivative of Debian, but it's trying to tread new-ish grounds. Pop OS is built on Ubuntu, but what makes Pop OS special is Pop OS is actually the only thing on here that's developed by a hardware company. So there is a laptop company called System 76, and they make laptops that run Linux mainly. You could get Windows on them too, but they are trying to write their own Linux operating system, and they're doing it in stages. So at some point, Pop OS might not even be recognizable as an Ubuntu distribution, but they're writing their own like graphical interfaces. They're doing all this stuff. So Pop OS is really treading ground fast because they're really trying to do every single thing kind of from scratch and in Rust, but not the Linux kernel. So they're not trying to mess with that. They're just trying to write the stuff around it, mainly stuff that users interact with directly, which is really cool. Now Dev1 again is a derivative of Debian, but what makes Dev1 interesting is that it uses so everything on this page minus Arch, Void, Gentoo, and maybe Alpine, I'm not sure. Linux-wise, use something called systemd, and systemd violates that Unix philosophy. So systemd is kind of like what the very first thing that runs on your computer to start spawning all the other things on your computer. So when your computer boots up, it loads in, the kernel and all that stuff, but then the very first process that runs on your computer is called an init system, and that init system is what kind of runs other software. And almost everything on this page, Linux-wise, runs systemd, and a lot of people have problems with that. And they had problems with it long before other sort of controversial things came up. So the guy who invented systemd, his name's Leonard Pottering, and one thing that most Linux people don't like is Windows specifically, and Leonard has now switched over to Microsoft, so there's a lot of kind of controversy over that. But people hated systemd long before that. Systemd tries to do too much all at once, and people don't like that. That is the very first thing that spawns in your task manager sort of thing on Linux. So we have things like Artix, Dev1, Void, and Gentoo. Technically, Gentoo you can run systemd because it's a choice right from the beginning, but specifically Dev1 and Arch are like counter culture operating systems that are spawns of another operating system that use systemd, that these new ones don't use systemd. So there's a lot of kind of philosophy and software politics in these distributions, which is cool for you because it gives you more choices. So Dev1 is a Debian derivative that doesn't use systemd. Artix is an Arch derivative that does not use systemd, and that's kind of like what makes them special, because now you get choice in something else. The computer that I am running here is actually running Artix right now. I could tell you just from experience that not having systemd is a little bit faster, but the problem with that is that now I have to do additional research anytime I need to do something for my init system to do something kind of not the status quo. Whereas if you run something with systemd, there's so much documentation, and because almost everybody else uses it, you could almost always get help. That's kind of like why people do still like systemd. So, but again, it's your choice. So if you want to learn something new, you can go that non-systemd route, but if you just want something that works and that you could get help with, you can run systemd. It's your choice. Let's see. Void is its own thing, so it's not even counterculture to begin with. The people at Void just said, hey, I actually like run it better, so we're just going to start with run it. Void is not anti-systemd technically, they just wanted to do their own thing. Gentoo from the beginning lets you choose absolutely any init system, so you could choose systemd if you wanted, but the standard, the one that they recommend is called OpenRC. I don't know about Dev1 if it uses something in particular that's not systemd, but I'm assuming you get the choice. On Artix, you get the choice for everything except systemd. If you did want systemd, you would just run Arch, because there's no difference between these two really, except that this one doesn't use systemd. All the other differences are kind of minor and easy to work around. Gentoo is very, very interesting, because Gentoo is, as far as I know on this whole page, the only one that encourages you to highly, highly, highly customize every single piece of software on your system. So all of these you could download software. Now, when you download software, what you're normally downloading is what's called a binary. So you're not downloading the source code and then compiling that yourself. You're downloading the pre-compiled binaries. You can get the source code on all these other ones if it's free and open source, but that's not normally what you're doing. Gentoo, on the other hand, when you download software using their package manager, you can download the binaries, but Gentoo gives you the option at the beginning to set what's called C flags, which allows you to customize the software being installed onto your computer by compiling it with or without certain features. So I ran Gentoo for about half a year. It was super interesting and a fun learning process. The only reason I stopped doing it is because I kind of the choices I made at the beginning influenced bad decisions later. I guess I'll say it that way, where I was setting too many C flags without really knowing what they were doing. So I kind of just broke my system. It wasn't technically broken. I just couldn't update it anymore, which was kind of sad. So I stopped using it. One day I would like to return, but one kind of choice I made at the beginning that I thought was a good one and was a good one was that I just took out Bluetooth from every single piece of software on my system. And that kind of just made it run faster. It's also, Bluetooth is a security concern because the Bluetooth protocol is not really secure at all. Think about any time you've paired software, if you did have to put in a pairing passcode, it was probably 0000, so any person trying to hack your system could just hack that. One other nice thing about Gentoo is that when you're downloading the kernel, it encourages you from the beginning to set flags on the kernel. So if you are running, say, an Intel CPU, then there's no reason you need AMD stuff. One thing about like Windows, Mac, and really almost everything else on this page, well, no, that's kind of a lie. On Windows and Mac, well, really just Windows, because Mac is now its own thing with its ARM processor. On Windows, when you download software, you're actually downloading software that supports everything, which means that file is significantly bigger. So when you download, say, graphics drivers on Windows, yes, you are downloading the NVIDIA ones if you're doing it like that. But from the beginning, Windows already has NVIDIA and AMD like backup drivers pre-built in, plus the graphic drivers from your CPU. Now that's just for graphics. Think about the plethora of other things that need to be supported, and that's all in Windows, like already up front. Gentoo encourages you from the beginning to just turn off the stuff you don't need. So right now I'm running an AMD computer. So when I had when I had Gentoo, I only had those AMD drivers in the computer. And then I have an NVIDIA graphics card, so I only downloaded those NVIDIA stuff into the kernel. I took out Bluetooth. I took out, there's something called KDE and Qt. I took out both of those because I run something completely different. So lots of choices right up front. I would not recommend this as a first distribution. I would go with quite literally anything else on the page, and then maybe graduate to something like Gentoo if you want to learn more. Very interesting. NixOS is kind of cool because remember when I was talking about the libcs? And if there's an update in libc, you kind of have to redo everything on your computer because then there could be cross-compatibility issues and stuff like that between different softwares running on your computer. NixOS gets around that by doing containers for every single piece of software on your computer. So that is really cool because so like Rust is a pretty popular programming language now, and the Rust compiler gets updated a lot. And when it gets updated, if you had software compiled for one version of Rust and then you get updated, you could break that piece of software. Nix gets around that by doing these containers so that it has a little sandbox for that specific piece of software so that it runs no matter what happens in terms of updates. If every single thing in that sandbox gets updated, then you could rerun the command and update all of it together. But if only one thing gets updated, you don't want to update that sandbox because then it could possibly break the software. So Nix is kind of cool because it does containers, and it's really cool because it is a solid distribution for kind of just having solid software that will always work as long as you're not going out of your way to break it. And I think that's all I want to do for this page. I could talk about all of these for like ever and ever. One thing is Alpine on here is, in terms of Linux, the one distro that is not GNU/Linux. It is built off Muscle and BusyBox, which are kind of two different alternatives to the GNU Foundation. And technically Gentoo also allows you to switch that from the beginning, but they don't encourage it. But it is a choice. So kind of cool. But I'll go on to the next page because I've kind of been here for a while. And I didn't mean to skip over the BSDs, but I'm just not too familiar with them. They are interesting though from like a research and learning standpoint. So this is called the distro chooser. So it's kind of just like a quiz. Let's go through it real quick because I think I'll have time. So you could go to this website as well and do your distro. So you're going to get asked a lot of questions. So some distributions are made for special purpose, some for daily use. What do you need? Well, I like to use my computer almost every single day. I don't necessarily care about anonymous web browsing as a default because I could set that up later. But if you are interested in that, you would want to click that. I don't really care about game publishers caring about my distribution because, again, I could set that up. But if you care about that out of the box, you would want to click that. This is like the sandboxing I was just talking about. So like if you clicked on this, you would probably get NixOS if that was like super important. You can star these, I believe, if you want the weight of this question to go up a lot higher. But yeah, this is that you run software in its own environment so you're not breaking other stuff. This is like an ADA compliant thing, so does your distro care about that right out of the box? And this is has a live CD, so you can play around with it before you install it, which doesn't really matter because I'll show you VirtualBox in another video. So the first one's the only one I care about. How would you rate your proficiency using a computer? I could troubleshoot most or all of my computer problems. If this is not you, then you could choose something else. How would you rate your knowledge of Linux itself? I would rate myself kind of middle ground. I could also put myself here, but I want to see what where this one takes me. Most of you will probably choose this first one, and that's all right. How many settings do you wish to tweak by yourself during installation? What do you want to configure? I like to configure as much as possible. I like to choose the settings myself. So this one, like the Linux I'll be showing you how to download, does not have a graphical interface. You do everything from the terminal. Whereas this one is kind of just default values. You don't get to choose too much. You can choose stuff later, but not during the install process. So I will choose that middle one. It is important to know how old your computer is, so you probably want to choose this one unless you have a very, very, very old computer, like pre-2010. So yeah, you would choose that if you had that. But you probably have a 64-bit computer because all modern computers do. Some distros prefer articles or wikis. What do you prefer? I prefer wikis. Some distros pride themselves on their like forums, community forums, I don't care about those forums. I like reading the wikis. This one I'm going to skip because I don't really like either of these that much. I don't like the Windows user interface, and I don't really like the Mac user interface that much. I like customizing my own, so I'm just going to skip this question. Most distribution are free. I like free. And I would not like to pay for one unless it was really good. Different distros pre-install different amounts of software. I would like to choose everything myself. This one is I would like a kind of a working system right out of the box. The license or ideology of a distribution is a contentious debate. So I told you about the GPL versus the BSD license. I would like free as much as I can. It is basically impossible to have a 100% free OS unless you are really choosing every piece of hardware meticulously. That's because if you have, like, say, Wi-Fi on your computer, there's almost a guarantee that you have to run non-free software to make that Wi-Fi run. Now, when I say non-free, I don't mean you pay for it. I mean it is a binary and you are not allowed to see the source code. So it is closed source software and you're not free to change it. But I would like to use as much free as in freedom, that I could change it licensing. But some people don't care about that. So like Steam isn't open sourced. So you would have to use their non-free licenses, which I use Steam too. So some distros use online services, so nope, I do not want, you may have heard this as, oh, excuse me, I don't want this. You may have heard of telemetry, so if you open up your networking on Windows, you'll see that it's constantly high because Windows is always sending your information to Microsoft headquarters. And in many cases, yes, it is used to improve user experiences, but I just don't want it at all because I don't like my data being sold. If you don't care about this or you actually want it, you would choose this one. But that's called telemetry. There are many ways to administrate a Linux distro to install software. So would you like an app store to download programs? Would you like to use the terminal? Yes. I want to avoid systemd. Yes. Me personally, I would not recommend choosing this if you don't even know what systemd is. It's not cool to hate things if you don't even know what they are. I have used systemd extensively over the past 4 years, and I just don't really care for it now that I have an alternative. But don't click on that just because I said so. Make your own choice. Some distros offer faster updates and some prefer stability. So I prefer fast updates, and this would be more like the Arch kind of distros. They're called rolling releases. So there's no like Arch kernel like number. You just get a timestamp every time they update the kernel. Versus like Debian or Ubuntu, you may have heard of like Ubuntu 2204. That's because that's going to last for like the next 3 years, that kernel. Now other software is going to get updated obviously, but they're not going to do any hardcore changes for like the next 3 years. So if you want stability, if you want that thing you downloaded to not need to be updated for a long time, choose this one. But I prefer fast or rolling releases. So we'll get my results. So what do you know, Gen 2? So I told you I ran this for a while. Pretty cool. Artix, I run Artix right now, so this is a pretty good recommender. Dev1, I'm actually interested in running Dev1. I just never have. I haven't really ran any of the Debian distros except on servers, so I don't know how they are for personal use, but plenty of people do run them, so I'm sure they're fine. Void Linux, I actually did switch to Void on my desktop for a while, but then my hard drive crashed like right after I did that, so I didn't get to spend too much time with Void. I really, really want to try it, so I might actually switch to Void in the near future just to try something else out for a little while. Arch. Arch I used the longest out of any Linux distro. I used it for about 3 years. Really, really good. Teaches you a lot about Linux in general, and has some of the best wiki pages for literally anything in existence, not just for Linux distros. Highly recommend Arch. Which Arch is what I will be installing for the VirtualBox because it has systemd. So in case we have to do anything systemd wise, it will be easy for everybody. But yeah, Crux. I don't know anything about Crux, but kind of sounds cool because it's lightweight focused. Rocky, Debian, and so on and so forth. So they recommend you a whole bunch of stuff moving forward, but the top 3 are usually what you want to pay attention to. Maybe the top 5, because everything from here on up I think is interesting for me. But obviously make your own choices. But yeah, so that was Distro Chooser. Hopefully I explained the options well, but feel free to go through them yourself and see what kind of Linux you would be interested in. At least with Linux, the choice is yours. So we're in the new section called Choice. I'm not going to go over these because I kind of just already talked about them. But what I do want to show you is I think people are very visually oriented. There's actually a Swedish saying that humans are creatures of the eye because we are very visually focused. So I'm going to show you some visual or aesthetic stuff that you could do in Linux that's kind of cool. That I'll talk about this later. You could do basically anything I've talked about in Windows or Mac, although it's kind of hard. But let me show you some of the things that right from the gate you could get started with Linux. So boop, boop, boop. I have to find what page I put it on. Okay, here we go. So this is kind of how your desktop can look like, not right out of the box, but very shortly out of the box with just a little bit of elbow grease. So this is DWM. This is actually what I'm currently running. So this is what's called a window manager. So let me just demonstrate what a window manager does real quick. So this is my volume control stuff, but I could spawn new terminals. And notice how the screen's kind of getting split and then stacked kind of automatically. That's because it's tiling, so kind of cool. I could run other software so you could kind of see what's happening. So kind of cool. Let me close it out of that. One thing I want to mention, just because I pulled this up, is that if you notice my memory usage, I'm only using 3.5 gigs of RAM right now. And as you can see, I have a whole bunch of stuff running right now. And not only do I have a whole bunch of stuff running right now, and I'm only using 3.5 gigs of RAM, but I'm obviously also recording this video on the same computer. So I'm running video streaming software on top of a browser, on top of multiple terminals, on top of an audio server, on top of a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm only using 3.5 gigs of RAM on my entire computer out of the 32 I have. So I know that's being cut off. Let me maximize it and rerun this. So this is 32 gigs of RAM. These are my specs if you wanted to check them out. But yeah, that's kind of interesting, right? Not using that much to do a whole bunch of stuff on my computer. So that's another benefit of Linux. If you go into Task Manager on your Windows, I could almost guarantee that you are not using this low of memory just to run your operating system. So kind of cool. This is DWM, tiling window manager. So that just means the windows tile as you spawn them. You can put it into floating mode. Floating is what you're used to if you run Mac or Windows, where you could kind of drag your windows around. One other thing to notice is that there's no tiling, there's no title bars here. So there's a title bar up here that's just telling me what window I'm focused on. But there's no, I will have There will be something in here that shows you what I mean, but kind of cool. Nice synthwave, vaporwave background. These are title bars, so they're the things that have the close, minimize, maximize buttons. I don't have those on there because I just took them out because I think they're a waste of space. But this is somebody's operating system. Like, this is like what they log into. They made all these icons, really beautiful looking. I'm not a fan of light themes, but I think this one is very beautiful, and they have their CPU, RAM usage, and then I think this is volume, so kind of cool that they just have that on their computer and they wrote that. Now, when I say they wrote that, they probably didn't write it from scratch. They probably downloaded something else and then modified the look. But you can write it if you want to, but don't think that you have to write every single piece of software on here. When I say the words they wrote that, I just mean they customized it. I don't know if they actually wrote it from scratch or not. This one's kind of a nice looking distro. Kind of that nice cyan futuristic, retro futuristic looking things, like something you would think computers would look like if you were like watching hacker movies in the 80s. This is Pop OS, not out of the box. Somebody made this though, and it looks really nice. Nice background, got that transparency on their window, so I'll actually demonstrate that on mine in just a bit, because I also have that ability. I just don't have it turned on at all times because I have to activate it basically. Lovely desktop background. They've got this nice title bar here, so they're running DWM as well. So I know this picture is a little blurry, but if you could see right here on mine, these numbers, so like hello is not what's supposed to be there. It's supposed to be the number 1, but I just made it say hello because why not? They have icons in here, so I could also put those in there as well. So let me see, I think it's Control E. Okay, so I could do this drop down menu on my computer. I actually wrote this myself, so this does not come out of the box, but let me do Arch real quick. Let's see. So I have this, so you probably can't read this because the font's really small. I do apologize about that, but I could load icons into my like copy and paste buffer, and then if I go here, I could paste it. So there's like the little Arch logo right there, and I could make these icons the Arch logo. This person here, this is the Firefox logo. I think this is Xmonad for some reason, even though they're running DWM, but kind of cool. And then they have like the angle brackets for web design. I don't know what this one is, and then they have a little file folder here. And then technically I have this icon too. I just need to go like that, and that's this icon right here. So this just tells you that it's in tiling mode versus full screen mode. When you see just a number here, that's full screen mode in DWM. But kind of lovely. They're running Gen 2. This is kind of a war crime in my opinion, because this is way too light. But it is kind of beautiful in some ways, but this would be blinding for me at the when I'm on my computer at 2 a.m. But very kind of aesthetically pleasing, right? It's very minimal. The blue and the white, really cool, and people just kind of customize their system to do that. But this is probably like something you could do on Windows with not that much work, or Mac, except they do have a bar down here. Some nice green, like neon green background. So this person's running Arch with Xmonad as their tiling window manager. So I'm running DWM. Xmonad's another one, but kind of not necessarily beautiful, but it's pretty cool looking. They have their own custom icons. They're running this thing on the side, which is called Conky. That kind of lets you look at system resources in real time. Really cool. I like this because they actually have a picture in their terminal versus ASCII text. So when I did NeoFetch, This is ASCII text because this terminal doesn't out of the box run photos, but this one does, whatever they're running here, so that's kind of cool. This is actually a video, but this is a screenshot of a video, but they have this hyper transparent terminal where you can't even see the background. It's just the text being displayed on the screen. Oh, okay, I wasn't able to zoom out last time. And then this is their file manager within their terminal. So as you can see, there's no background. You can't see the borders of the terminal. But nice, got some Fooly Cooly in the background. That I used to have Fooly Cooly as my background, but I took that off. Now I just have a blank one, but really cool. Like this hyper transparent background is like really cool to see when it's just the text on your wallpaper from whatever program you're doing. So kind of cool. This is awesome WM. So this is what I'm going to be putting on your ISO for you to play around with, because it's pretty straightforward and you could download a lot of custom themes right out of the box. But they're using what's called Nord. Nord is a color scheme. It's this like light blue, icy, like Nordic color scheme. So it's kind of nice and pleasing on the eyes. I like the like muteness of the paleness of the colors. So kind of cool. And they got their taskbar on the side. Kind of cool. This one, I don't remember what this one is. I want to say it's open box, but it could also be the awesome window manager. But they wrote their own icon set, which is kind of cool, and really beautiful color scheme in their terminal. I think this is NeoVim. Yes, it is. So NeoVim's a text editor. But yeah, really beautiful. Like all this stuff that they have that they could kind of just switch to. Really cool. This nice green one. I really like this one. I like the like pixel art in the background. This is called a Zathura, so it's a PDF viewer, and what's nice is that you could set custom colors for all your PDFs in Zathura as long as they're not like screenshots. So if it's just plain text in your PDF along with some photos, you could actually switch the colors of your PDF while you're reading them. So they got this really cool dark green color scheme for all their PDFs, which is really cool. They got like a music player here. This might just be Spotify because people write their own Spotify skins in Linux. But I can't necessarily tell. This could be, I guess it has to be Spotify because they have like whatever this is, the playlist there. But yeah, kind of like really beautiful. And then they have this cool like photo viewing tool. I really like this one. It's aesthetically pleasing. Another like cyan blue. This is the same one. Yeah, this one's kind of cool. When it's just wallpapers, it's a little lazy in my opinion, but they do have this cool, I think this is called Rofi on the side. It's a like launch bar, so kind of like what you have in Mac OS. But yeah, this one's just kind of cool, and I think the reason it's shaped like this is because they have two different sized monitors, and they were taking a picture of both monitors and like stacking them on top of each other. So kind of cool. Nice transparent bar up here too. This one, I just chose it because it's also awesome window manager, but they have this nice like pink coloring scheme. There's something called Pie Wall, which will just switch your color scheme depending on your background, which is kind of cool. But they got this transparency in the background on their terminal, so that's kind of cool. This one, this person in general, their name is Empress Noodles on Reddit. They make wonderful like window manager themes. So this is also awesome WM. Super beautiful. She made all these really cool like widgets. Awesome lets you make your own widgets kind of with not that much effort. It is a little confusing. I haven't been super successful at it, but you could read her. They're called dot files. They're the customization files. You could read hers. You could actually download this for yourself and run it on the ISO. So super cool stuff. Really beautiful. I love these widgets. I love this color scheme of the like pastel colors on the black. Really cool. This one's kind of just wallpaper, but just kind of aesthetically pleasing. And they have this nice terminal like color thing that pops up different images. So kind of cool. This is another one of Elena's or Empress Noodle's color schemes. So just really cool. I like it a lot. She made all these custom icons and just really cool. I like it. This is not necessarily the Linux part of Linux, like the desktop or anything like that. This is before you even boot into Linux. You could choose what you want to boot into. So this person is dual booting both Manjaro Linux and Windows. And they put this nice like Ghost of Tsushima like background type thing on there, and it looks really cool. So when I boot into it, it's just a black screen with like white text. So this is very aesthetically pleasing. And think about how kind of like dumb this is. Like you only look at this page for like 5 seconds and then you don't look at it until you reboot your computer. But people have thought, hey, like I don't want to look at this ugly boot screen, so I'm going to make something. So that's something you could do in Linux, which is nice. This is another kind of like light theme, which I don't necessarily appreciate light themes, but what I like is that they have these gradients on their title bars, and it's just very cool. They also have this nice like launcher down here that matches the theme, so really cool. And nice rounded corners, nice rounded windows. As you can see, I don't have window rounding on this, but when I launch the transparency, you'll see that my borders will be rounded. This is also that boot in screen. So they made this like really cool like 16-bit computer. Really cool. Super awesome. Lots of Neon Genesis in here, so this is kind of the first one. This is just kind of Nord, but yeah, just some transparencies, not anything crazy, but just kind of cool. This is the Thura again, so they have a light blue PDF viewer. Another Neon Genesis. Matches the color scheme, so kind of cool. This person's running Gentoo with hyper transparency and kind of just aesthetically pleasing wallpaper. This one is also awesome WM, so that's you could tell because of this A in the corner. Oh, this is the first one we viewed, but yeah, kind of cool. Yep, that is all of them, so kind of cool. So that's the customizations you could do, and then I had 3 videos to show. So this one's cool because like in Windows or Mac, when you log into your user, this is like that user login page. So in Linux, we call these a display manager, and somebody wrote like animations into there. So kind of cool that they did this. Again, this is something you only look at for like 5 seconds, but somebody just wanted to make it really nice looking. So we'll watch this, but yeah, kind of cool that they have animations on their users and not just like a chess piece or a duck, which you'll probably remember from like Windows 7 or Vista. I can't remember. This one, this person's just showing off their workflow, but kind of cool, like resizing stuff and just kind of have a nice like layout. And then the last one, this one's just color scheme. So this person has a hotkey that switches their color scheme and background. So kind of cool. But yeah, really lovely. So they're running Arch, and then they have a BSPWM. So that's like an alternative to DWM. But yeah, that's the choices you get when you run Linux. Kind of cool. Okay, so now on to misconceptions. So X can't do Y. So anything I've talked about in this talk, if you are stubborn and hardworking enough, you could probably get it to work on whatever you're using. So I just showed you all those cool Linux stuff. You could run it on Windows and Mac if you're hard-headed enough to make it work. Now, you're going to go through a lot of friction to get that done, but I don't want to lie to you and say you can't do it. It's just not encouraged, and there's a lot of friction in the way. So that's kind of just a misconception across the board. But, one thing you've probably heard is that, like, well, Windows is the only viable option for gaming. Well, that's kind of a lie, right? The Steam Deck runs a derivative of Arch Linux. And the Steam Deck obviously plays like the vast majority of Steam games. You could actually check on a website called ProtonDB. This website will tell you what percentages of games are playable on the Steam Deck and on Linux in general. So ProtonDB was around before the Steam Deck. So if I do something like, say, The Witcher 3... Witcher 3 has a platinum rating, but it's going down, so I'm wondering if it's people running it on Steam Deck and it's kind of breaking. But you could read that this is Steam Deck verified, and platinum's obviously the best, works perfectly well. Let me see. Trying to think of something that's not going to work. I wonder if I'm logged in already. I am not. Let's try Death Stranding maybe. So Death Stranding has a gold. So what that means is that all you have to do is run a little bit of tweaks beforehand in the Steam launcher to make it work. And I might as well just show you that now. So I'm going to run Steam real quick. It might have to do an update, but hopefully it just launches. And we'll wait just a little bit, but for those that don't know, you could run commands before you even start a game. So I'm going to go here. So all of my games run something beforehand. So I could click play here, which I'll do just to show you that it actually runs. If it has to run the Vulkan launchers, I'll just stop it because that takes like forever. But I just updated them recently, so hopefully it just plays. But okay, yeah, I'm gonna just skip this because it takes forever. But we could go in here, and I have just this one little option right here for me, which Linux does not auto choose if your CPU is running graphics or if your graphics card is running graphics. So I just write this little command in here for every single game to say, hey, offload all the graphics stuff to the GPU so that my CPU isn't running at like 100% and frying itself. Yeah, so I know this game will probably load pretty quick, so I'll just click on this to show you that games do in fact run on Linux. That's not like a huge myth. Then we'll just give it just a few seconds and hopefully something will come up. I haven't launched this game in a while, so it might be doing some background stuff. For some reason, some games run instantaneously and some take like forever. Cool, something in there. No start screen, but we'll rage quit out of a difficult game about climbing. Almost every single game on here I've been able to play. Haven't really had any issues. And anytime I do, it's easy to fix unless the game is what's called borked, which is red. So those games, you're kind of SOL. Now, because I don't want to lie to you, again, what I'm saying here is X can't do Y. Yes, it probably can. But on like this line, although you will be breaking terms of service, well, this isn't necessarily terms of service, but like, yes, you can get something like Fortnite or League of Legends or any of those BattleNet stuff to work on Linux. But You probably will get banned if you don't hide that you're running Linux, because Epic and all of those types of people just don't want Linux. Tim Sweeney is actively against Linux for whatever reasons he has. He does not want to support, he does not want Epic to support Linux. So yes, you can get those games running, but you might be banned for doing so. So I don't want to lie to you about that, but that's just the reality of it. So yes, if you do want to try, you can, because there are people who have done it. Tiling window managers are on Mac and Windows. I've seen them. They're not as cool as the ones on Linux because they just don't have thousands upon thousands of people trying to make them better, but they do exist. All systems are unstable and break at some point, so don't believe that, like, say, oh, Mac and Windows are just super stable. Like, well, we kind of all know that it's a lie, because you've probably been forced to do an update and then it takes forever, and then you can't shut down your computer, and all of that stuff's kind of frustrating. Linux will break for different reasons than those, but every single thing's breakable, and you probably will mess up at some point. So don't let that discourage you, but it's just a misconception that, oh, X is super stable, it will never break. Well, that's a lie across the board. Another misconception, X is too hard to switch to. So this is another game that's on my Steam. So let me see if I can find it. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. So you can see the hammer guys right there. His name's Diogenes. I put this I put this picture in here because there's for those that don't know, this game is just highly difficult. You have to climb up a really big mountain and a whole bunch of different obstacles using just a hammer to, like, swing yourself around. So it's kind of hard, but it's a very philosophical game. The person who made the game is a PhD in philosophy for, like, drug addiction and stuff, but he writes, like, this beautiful monologue that he speaks to you throughout the game. And one of the very first lines in the game is starting over is harder than starting up. And the reason I want to say that is because there's this big misconception that, like, oh, Linux is too hard. Well, that's only because you've been so ingrained into Windows or so ingrained into Mac. And likewise, if people were into Linux before and tried to switch to Windows, it's going to be hard because you're not used to doing those things. But I could almost guarantee that you did not touch a computer the very first time and were a complete wizard at doing whatever you do now. You had to build up all that muscle memory and do a whole bunch of stuff and learn and break stuff and Google stuff. And where you are at now is you're probably comfortable, and comfortability is, like, one of the worst things you could ever have in life, because anytime you have to learn something new, you're kind of screwed, because you're going to hit all those roadblocks and have all that friction trying to get through to do something you could do before but you can't do anymore. It's kind of like having to learn to walk all over again when you switch to a new S sometimes. So I don't want that. It is going to be hard, but it's not too hard. I guarantee you could stick with anything, and if you're willing to Google stuff, you could switch to any other operating system and be just fine. Now, sometimes that means you're not going to be doing things the same way you did before. Sometimes that means that you're going to learn a brand new way to do something, and even if that new way is not in the long run better than what you are used to, at least you have a new tool under your tool belt, which I think is really important. You want to be fluent in a whole bunch of different operating systems and use cases and programming languages, especially if you're in computer science. You're never going to stop learning if you're in the computer science field. So trying to delve into as many new things as possible and sticking with them, that's the important part, is really going to be useful. Next week we'll be talking about programming languages, so it's not useful to, like, just run through the tutorial of a new programming language and then never touch it again, because you didn't learn anything new. learning is a lifelong process for literally anything you do. So if you do want to try a new operating system out, don't give up at the first or the 10th or the 100th roadblock. Keep pushing through, and I can guarantee you'll end up with something that you'll be really satisfied with, even if you don't stick with it career-wise or anything like that. I'm sure you will have learned something and have a new appreciation for everything your computer does. So I just want to end this with some resources, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, just kind of throw them out there. If you're on Windows or an x86 Mac, so like not the M series one, you could download Oracle's VirtualBox from this website. You could use Windows Subsystem for Linux, but I've only tried it a little bit, so I don't really want to recommend that. I just want to say that it is an option. I can't personally help you with it if you do need help throughout the semester, but I did want to throw that out there for you. In Windows, you can download a virtualized Linux and run it in your terminal, and it works just the way that every other Linux does, but now you're kind of playing with fire because now your Linux has access directly to your Windows, and then there's kind of too much iffy stuff. So I wouldn't recommend doing this, but I do want to say that it's an option. For M series Macs, the Apple Silicon Macs, so the newer ones, you could use something called VMware Fusion Player. You will see a price tag, but it's free for personal use. Or you could use something called UTM. I have not played with either of these as well, but I think through my work I'm going to get one of these Apple computers soon, so hopefully I could try it out and let you know. But these are the only two options when I was Googling that you could use right now. Brave souls could try QEMU or hypervisors or KVM. KVM is a hypervisor. These are running emulations within your terminal, and I've only tried QEMU once and it was kind of hard to do, but it is a possibility. So VirtualBox is my recommendation and what I'll be demonstrating the video with, because it works on Linux as well. And hopefully I can do a video on this soon. I just don't have the hardware to do it right now, but hopefully we could all be using VirtualBox for the rest of the semester anytime we need to do anything Linux related. If you'd like to learn more about Linux, read the Arch or Gentoo wikis. Even if you decide to go with Ubuntu, even if you decide to go with Pop! OS, if you're using Linux, read either of these wikis. They're super informal. Anytime you need to like do anything weird, like, oh, I don't know how like MPV works, which is a movie player. These two explain how to use it. Super cool. They are basically the pinnacle of software documentation in general. I don't think anything's better than Arch or Gentoo, except like books written in the 80s for like software development. Those are really good as well. But nothing modern even comes close to these two documentations. Actually use Linux, so that's kind of what I was talking about before. If you just play around for a little bit in a virtual machine, you didn't learn anything, and you won't know Linux, so you have to use Linux. Try to use it once a week. Try to use it daily. Just boot it up for a little bit and play around and try to do something new and non-trivial in it. Don't dual boot. I have nothing against dual booting, although it is a little bit dangerous because you could completely wipe out your like Windows or whatever. The reason I don't recommend dual booting is because, to give an analogy, it's like buying a guitar and then putting it in a case and then putting it under your bed. You have to go through all these steps to get it out from under your bed and open the case and get it out and tune it. You probably won't learn guitar if you do that. If you dual boot, you're probably just going to boot into Windows every single time and never run Linux, because there's this extra friction layer to run Linux if you dual boot. So nothing against dual booting. I just don't think you're ever actually going to use it if you do try to dual boot. Read books or watch YouTube. Uh, YouTube is nice for getting those like quick highs on learning and just like looking at visual stuff. But books are I don't even want to say like a million times better because YouTube is basically like zero, and obviously anything times zero is zero. But YouTube is nice just to get you motivated, but try to read books on the subject because you're going to learn a lot more. And try to purposely break things in Linux and try to fix them. You're gonna feel very rewarded if you fix anything on Linux. It's gonna feel really good. So here's YouTube channels. I'm not gonna go over them. Although the first Mental Outlaw and Up, really good for just learning about Linux in general. And a lot of these ones on this side are really good in general. The reason I put stars on these two is because this person runs GNU Herd. Remember, I said I was only going to talk about it one more time way at the beginning. This person only runs like GNU software, so it's kind of cool just to see that and see how it's a little bit different. But he does a lot of Emacs stuff, which Emacs is kind of weird. It's supposed to be a text editor, but it does like 5 trillion other things, so kind of interesting. And Dave's Garage is also not Linux specific. Dave is actually somebody who worked for Microsoft. He is the inventor of Task Manager. He's the inventor of like the 7-zip or whatever is on Windows. But he's written code for Mac, Windows, and Linux, so you're probably running some of Dave's software no matter what computer you use, and he is just kind of a wealth of knowledge and a well of knowledge, so I like his channel. But check out these channels. Check out these books. These first two are like very academic books that will teach you the theory, and then the rest are kind of so this one right here is probably going to be way too hard for you now, but just keep these on your radar. Some of these are like the Linux Bible is not necessarily about the operating system itself, but it's about the tools you need to succeed, and that's the same with this How Linux Works. So if you want to learn how to use the terminal really well, these two books are awesome. But most of these are hardcore about like the operating system itself and not the tools around it, but really good resources. So thank you. If you have any questions, drop them in the Discord. And yeah, thank you all for watching. If you have any questions about anything, just ask. Hopefully I could answer them. And I hope you get into Linux or even the BSDs. I'll be making a video sometime later today on the downloading and installing Arch Linux and getting it ready and usable for the stuff that we will hopefully do this semester in the CS Club. So thank you all again and have a nice day.